Hello and welcome to the CBB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walt Waddell, aka Dub Deuces 85, and we are officially into the off season. I don't have a DFS slate to break down for you. I don't have any prize picks to talk about or any betting opportunities to give you. What I do have is college basketball off-season content that I'm going to provide to you each and every Wednesday night, whether that's live like it is right now or pre-recorded with interviews that I have planned with coaches, players, and the like. We're going to kick things off tonight with a way too early top 25 ranking that I have made myself. We'll be going up tomorrow morning on the FTN site. Put a lot of time and effort into this. You know, there are several sites and media conglomerates who have already released their way too early top 25 rankings. I know it's trendy, but you know, if we're going to go full bore into this off season and provide this content, we need to be providing the best possible off-season content, and that means we need to have our own ranking system. Now, this rankings, it's going to be fluid. There's going to be changes. I'm going to update it as things happen. What kind of things happen? Well, once coaches are decided for a few programs like Kentucky, possibly Baylor, possibly Kansas State as it starts. You know, we know Coach Calipari is over at Arkansas now. We know that, you know, Scott Drew is being offered the Kentucky job. We're not sure if that's going to happen. A lot of wackiness today on Twitter when it regards to, hey, he's at this restaurant. He's not there. Maybe he's actually flying out. What's going to happen there? Some Kentucky fans still are convinced they're going to get Dan Hurley. It's a lot of craziness. And if Drew ends up going to Kentucky, of course, that means Jerome Tang's going to go to Baylor. Kansas State will be without a coach, and there's going to be a lot of changes. So these top 25 rankings are going to be as it stands right now, current rosters and how I see it. And these are some of the teams are still waiting for decisions on players who are going to be, you know, making draft declarations or ultimately ending up in the portal still. There's a lot of things going on. You know, there's pre-draft camps, Portsmouth, G League camp, the combine, all that stuff. So there's going to be a lot of things that are happening, and we're going to be reporting on all of this stuff. So really, really hope that you guys are going to be hanging out with me, checking it out, you know, and really as I give you this different type of content than what you're used to seeing from me, in that it's not DFS related, it's not betting related, but hey, it's going to allow us to keep our knowledge up. And when the season comes back around, you're going to know about every single team, every single player. You're going to be well prepared to make these kind of decisions on who you like, who you're going to play, and what this team is all about. This is really what I'm angling for during the off season. So appreciate those of you who are checking me out live and continue to do so. Make sure you smash that like button and help us out. Again, we're going to be doing this each and every Wednesday, providing off-season content. I'm really excited to do this. I'm really honored that FTN is going to allow me to continue to do this as well. And you guys have really showed out on all of our shorts and our different, you know, our recordings and our long videos, live shows, and you guys have really continued to support us, and that's really meaningful to me. So I want to give you that top-notch content as well. Over on FTN Bets, there is a free article that I dropped a couple of days ago. That was 5 teams to look at for futures. Basically, FanDuel and other sites, of course, have released their 2025 Men's National Championship odds. There were a few teams that I had highlighted there that I really like, so you definitely want to check that out over on FTN Bets. You know, Houston Cougars at plus 1,500 was a team I really liked. Of course, Duke, they're at plus 1,100. Kansas plus 1,200. You know, those usual cast of characters. I think Kansas is a very interesting team. And then there's a lot of good value on a team like Iowa State highlighted there at plus 4,000. They've got some pieces, but I don't want to get into that too much. That was already up. I want to specifically go into this top 25 rankings, and we're going to jump into it immediately. Again, it's going to be a fluid ranking. With every week, I will do updates and edits and make changes, because inevitably teams are going to fall out. Teams are going to jump in. Like, there's going to be a lot of stuff happening. The portal is very, very vast, and there are a ton of unsigned players still that we don't know about and where they're going to ultimately end up going. All right, so with that being said, let's get into the CBB Super Show way too early top 25 rankings for the 24-25 season. All right, getting into number 1, it's going to be the Houston Cougars. And yes, that may draw a side eye from some, but hear me out. Jamal Shead is up in the air with if he's going to return. I wasn't sure that he had the COVID year available to him, because when he was a freshman, it turns out he does have that COVID year available. So if he wants to come back and play his final collegiate season, he can do so. Right now, it's 50-50 if that's going to happen. The only player Houston will technically be without pending Shead's decision is going to be Damian Dunn. He did decide to hit the portal once again. He'll be gone. They've already got confirmation from Juwan Roberts, who's going to come back. LJ Cryer also, 2 key pieces from last year's team. They're going to be very, very big focal points for this team. You're also going to see Manny Sharp, who's my guy, coming back for another season, over a summer of development. He's going to be huge. A healthy Joe Tugler. JoJo Tugler looked like a star last year pre-injury. We're going to see some really massive things out of him. And Javier Francis should be back as well. So that's a really nice core of group of players. And Terry Arsenault, who also suffered a season-ending injury. I mean, Houston got ravaged by injuries. Really tough. Arsenault being back. This Houston team is very deep. This ranking right now is number 1. I will boldly say that is without Jamal Shead. Without Shead, I still feel like going into the season, as it stands right now, lots of changes still to come, Houston would be the number 1 ranked team. With Shead, it's a no-brainer. I think, as long as they stay healthy, that's a Final Four team. Kelvin Sampson has proven that he can get into the portal and pull good players out. They typically don't lose a lot of players. Since COVID, he's lost less than 6 players to the portal. One happened to be Tremont Mark. That was a very massive loss that they took last year. Guess what? Mark's back in the portal. Could Tremont Mark come back to Houston? That's on the table. Maybe he does return. Maybe that talks Jamal Shead into returning. This Houston team has a ton of upside. Hit a little bit of bad luck there with that Shead injury. I think everybody, even Duke fans, could admit, had Shead been able to play in that second half, Houston would have won that game. Who knows what would have happened after that? Houston Cougars are the number 1 team in our way too early rankings. Number 2, and this one is going to get a lot of people wondering what the hell I'm talking about. But the Iowa State Cyclones come in as the number 2 team on our way too early rankings. And it's definitely on the surface, a weird decision for me to put them there. But it really just has to do with the fact that TJ Otzelberger, he's a good coach, right? But he's going to be returning the nucleus of a Sweet 16 team that really important positions, the guards. And I know big men during this last tournament were very important, but still, at the end of the day, you need to have veteran guards on your team. We're not in the one and done area anymore. The early draft entrant era, like, we're just in a different era of college basketball right now, and you need to have veterans, especially at the guard positions, in order to make deep tournament runs and ultimately win the tournament. The Cyclones, with that odds, and the reason I mention those odds is because, hey, this plus 4,000 on FanDuel, it's plus 2,500 on DK. They are a really nice look. They're going to be returning to Min Lipsey. I know he gave us some trouble in DFS at times. Sean Gilbert, it sounds like Curtis Jones is going to return as well. And then Milan Momclevic, who a lot of pundits are excited about him. There's talk of him working his way into a first-round draft pick conversation after next season. He's going to be a huge focal point, and he's going to be a much better three-point shooter. We're talking about this kid probably coming into the season red hot and being able to maintain a 40% or higher three-point percentage. That's a really nice core. They pushed Illinois. I mean, they nearly had them beaten. It just came down to, hey, the Cyclones offensively, they weren't very good. Defensively, they're going to be an elite team once again. They need to add some offensive pieces. They are losing a trio of options in the front court, Trey King, Robert Jones, and Hassan Ward. They didn't give them a ton offensively there. They've already gone into the portal. Deshaun Jackson coming in from Charlotte. averaged over 11 points, 5 rebounds per game. He's going to be a factor. Nate Heisey from Northern Iowa, he's a decent enough scorer. And then Brandon Chatfield comes in to shore up their depth from Seattle U. And then they also have the 7-footer JT Rock, who will be coming into his second season. There's going to be a lot of talk about his maturation and development and coming in and possibly being a starting center there at the beginning of the season. He'll fight with or battle out Deshaun Jackson. And the Cyclones are certainly not done here either, but that is a really good team. You're going to notice in these rankings, I'm very high on teams that have veterans returning, especially at the guard positions. And there are a few teams that have like very high upside, but younger groups that I'm not quite as confident in. I'm really leaning on those veteran type players. So Iowa State does come in at number 2 on the rankings there, which I know probably surprised some people. At 3, we have the Kansas Jayhawks. And this basically comes down to Bill Self. I mean, he's still, for my, Dan Hurley, I love Dan Hurley. He's quickly becoming like the best coach, the best active coach, I should say, not best ever, but best active coach for my money. But to me, that's still that title, that mantra goes to Bill Self. They had a pretty rough season, right? Coming into it, everybody had them picked as a top 3 team, shoe in for a 1 seed. They're going to go to the Final Four. I mean, this Kansas team was just can't miss. The injury bug hit them just like it did several other teams on this list. Their lack of depth really hurt them. Most teams couldn't allow like 4 or 5 former 4- and 5-star recruits to walk in the portal and survive it. Kansas did let that happen. They replaced some pieces, but it ended up hurting them a lot more than I think a lot of people thought, including them, definitely including me. And ultimately, they fizzled out because McCullough couldn't get healthy and they just didn't have enough. They have gotten commitments already from KJ Adams and DeJuan Harris. They will be back. Hunter Dickinson is still up in the air. I ultimately think he will return. I think on the draft, mock drafts are all over the place. This is such a weird draft and what they're calling a weaker draft. I think a lot of draft pundits aren't really sure where guys are going to go. Hunter Dickinson, I've seen him in the second round. I've seen him undrafted. Either way, I have not seen him as a first rounder. NIL exists. It makes sense for Hunter Dickinson to come back, be the big man on campus, make all the NIL, and ultimately play under Bill Self, who thrives with big men. When Kansas, won their most recent title, they ran it through their big guys, and they had a really successful run because David McCormick just became an absolute star under Bill Self. McCormick, I don't know, these days how the professional life is treating him, but that season next to Ochai Agbaji and Christian Braun and Jalen Wilson, was a really good team, but McCormick was a main reason for that. I could see Kansas making a run with Hunter Dickinson leading the way. So I do believe he ultimately comes back. They do have a Riley Kugel coming in from Florida. You guys know how hit or miss he can be, but his minutes were all over the place. Playing for Kansas, I think he comes in and has a huge role. He's going to be a scoring machine for them. They also bring in Zeke Mayo from South Dakota State, 17-point per game type of scorer, guy who can get 20. He's very good for this team. They need scores. They need guys who can go out and get a bucket, really that simple. They get that with those 2 additions. They have a top 10 recruiting class coming in. This is the year of what I'm going to be calling the Bill Self Revenge Tour, and it starts right now. So I expect them to be active. They are being linked to some other transfers as well, but pretty much everything's on hold until we get that Hunter Dickinson decision. But as it stands right now, I have them as 3rd. Very easily could see them as 1st with Hunter Dickinson committed and another transfer coming in as well. At 4, I have the UConn Huskies. Now, I've looked around at some other rankings, from CBS and Field of 68, and it does seem like a lot of those publications are very low on the UConn Huskies. Obviously everyone's high on Hurley, but it's the second year in a row where they're going to have to replace a ton of production. And last year, the talk was, man, Sanogo gone, Hawkins gone, Jackson. There's no way that they can replicate what they did without those guys. And not only did they replicate it, but they exceeded it. And now you go into a situation where, that tournament hangover is going to be there. Sure. Three-peat, rarely do we see a repeat, let alone a three-peat. Now, I've been on record many times saying this UConn championship window, it's wide open. It's not closing anytime soon. But when you look down and you get into it, I can't doubt a team coached by Dan Hurley. I don't think he's going to Kentucky. All the Kentucky fans who continue to say, yes, he's coming to, we can offer him all the money. That's fine. But sometimes it's easy for me to sit here and be like, I wouldn't take that money. I mean, like a raise is great. But when you're talking about like, a $4 million difference, like, but you're already making millions and millions of dollars, is it really like worth going into that situation? Like, his family Northeast, he's a legend over there. He's going to have like the lifetime contract thing at UConn. It's going to be so easy to recruit there and grab guys out of the portal. Why would he go to, other than money, what would be the reason to go to Kentucky? Right. So what Hurley's going to be at UConn when the season starts next year. Hurley's going to be at UConn. And you look at what he's going to have to replace. Donovan Clingan and Stephen Castle are both projected to be lottery picks. They're not coming back, obviously. Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer, my man Spence, they are out of eligibility. There is no rabbit in the hat trick here. There's no more COVID eligibility. They're just simply out of eligibility. They cannot play. Hassan Diarra does have an extra year. I erroneously thought he did not. He actually does. So Diarra could end up coming back and playing for his third championship if he wants to. There's not a lot more he has to prove other than, the professional rankings. But another year in college isn't going to get Diarra to the NBA. He's probably going to have a nice professional career, whether that's overseas or whatever. That's all respectable. But there is NIL on the table. And again, the chance to be the king on campus. So I'm starting to think Diarra does come back. Initially on Monday, I was like, no, he's gone. But now it seems like there's a good chance he may return. Still, Clingan, Castle, Spencer, and Newton, and possibly Alex Karaban gone. That would be the starting five. Now, they got Newton and Karaban back after their first title last year, which helped with that transition. Losing your entire starting five, that's pretty rough. That's rough for anyone. However, Hurley will be able to get pretty much his pick of the litter in the portal. So I think they'll be able to line up players as they see fit. No problem. I mean, if you're getting a phone call from Coach Hurley himself or anyone on his staff for that matter, and they say, hey, here's what we can offer you: playing time, a championship pedigree, and, and plenty of NIL opportunities, why as a prospect would you choose anywhere else? Other than maybe you want to be closer to home. I could understand that. So they're going to get guys. Karaban is probably a 50-50 proposition. Right now it looks like he's getting a second round grade. He'll go through the draft process. We probably won't have an answer to what, he's actually going to do until the deadline, which I think is late May, early June. Might have to double check that, somewhere in May, probably. So we'll see if he works himself into a first round grade or he gets one of those first round promises, which always make me uneasy with draft prospects. Like, oh, this guy got a first round promise, he has to go out. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, he didn't get drafted in the first round. There's nothing that, unless you sign a contract, which I don't think is legal, right? Early, that you're going to get drafted in the first round. You just don't know. So if you're a fringe guy like Karaban, that's pretty tough. NIL exists, opportunity to win a third championship. My gut tells me Karaban comes back, but it'll depend on how well he does during those camps and pre-draft workouts. So we could be looking at a whole new starting five. If Hassan Diarra comes in or comes back, he's a starter. He has to be. Jalen Stewart, the guy that Hurley in his pressers during the tournament said, please stay. We can't afford to lose you. You're going to be the guy. Like, literally all about Jalen Stewart in those pressers. He'll be back. He played ball in my backyard. Love him. I think he's a major star breakout candidate. He's going to be, a Big East player of the year type of caliber player. Watch out for Jalen Stewart. Then those next tier of guys that came in this class with Castle, Solo Ball, Jaden Ross, those guys are all going to have to step up. Singare, Samson Johnson, if he decides to come back, which I believe he will, those guys are all going to have to take on bigger roles. But clearly, they're going to have to go into the portal to get some pieces here. But if Karaban and Diarra come back, you're looking at a Diarra, Karaban, Jalen Stewart, Solo Ball, Samson Johnson starting lineup. No, it's not as fearsome as what they just ran the last 2 years, but it's upper echelon, and those guys all have championship experience. And that beyond Jalen Stewart, one of Jaden Ross, Solo Ball, and Yusuf Singare is going to take a huge step forward, probably going to be Solo Ball. So I know that was long-winded there, but I have UConn at number 4 right now. I just will not be doubting them anytime soon. If they land, another Cam Spencer-esque type player in the portal, they're probably going to be heading for number 2 behind Houston. In the 5th spot, we have the Duke Blue Devils. Yes, I'm not a real big fan of Duke, but I'm trying to be objective here while doing this. John Shire, coming into the season, they have a huge, recruiting class. It feels like the whole, Duke under Coach K, they were stuck in the one and done era. Like they were masters of the one and done era. John Calipari at Kentucky, masters of the one and done era. As we moved away from that, you really needed veterans to compete. It seemed like those two programs didn't really move forward with the rest of the country. Calipari kind of did. He got some transfers in there and they did well. Duke, not as much. Where Duke has really kind of made their money is getting guys who are projected one and dones to come back for another year, like Mark Williams a couple of years ago. They got Proctor back this year, Mark Mitchell, guys like that. They are going to be relying heavily on these freshmen that are coming in. They have future lottery picks, Cooper Flagg, who's the talk of the town as the number 1 overall kid. Kaman Molokak, who is going to be a lottery pick. At least he's projected to be a lottery pick. A lot will be told when he's on the court, of course, but that's 2 guys who are definitely one and dones. They already have had Christian Reeves, who was a little used player, ended up, playing like a couple of games. He's hit the portal, and surprisingly, perhaps not surprisingly when you look at it, but Mark Mitchell also hitting the portal. Expected to be a one and done. He's there for 2 years, clearly getting a recruited over. He'll land well. I'm actually pretty excited about him. But looking at it, they're going to be really, really heavy on these freshmen. I would expect Kyle Filipkowski to declare. I would expect Jared McCain to declare. It comes down to Jeremy Roach and Tyrese Proctor. Can they get both of those guys back? That's for the best. One of those 2 back, they'll be all right. If neither of them came back, that would be kind of tough. Caleb Foster will be back healthy. He's going to take on a bigger role. But this is just a very young-looking roster here, depending on the decisions of Tyrese Proctor and Jeremy Roach. So I do have Duke at number 5 for that reason. I've seen them number 1 on a couple of publications, and I've seen them as low as 9 on others, but they fit in right there at 5. Number 6, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Many said, and myself included, hey, this looks like it's going to be a down year. Steele Venters, who they got from EWU, is going to be a big part of the program, gets hurt. There's no depth. This team is they're not looking so great. And I made the mistake, and it was a quick reminder, and I won't be making it again anytime soon. Never doubt Mark Few and Gonzaga, regardless of what their roster looks like. They, kind of breezed their way into another second weekend of the tournament. They just Sweet 16 is like their floor regardless. Now you look at what they're going to be bringing back. Anton Watson has exhausted eligibility. Love Anton Watson. Watched him play for a very long time, even in his high school years on the eastern part of Washington State. That's going to be a tough one. However, they will be looking to bring back Ryan Nembhard, Graham Ike, Ben Gregg, Braden Huff, Justy Stromer, all of these pieces. Obviously, Ike and Nembhard, the most important there. Nolan Hickman. Gregg and Huff, one of those 2 is going to make a major step forward. Dusty Stromer will develop as a more confident scorer. And then they have gone ahead and brought in the transfer from Pepperdine, Michael Ajayi, who is also declared for the NBA. So he's going to go through that process, but assuming that, he gets notes and then comes back, he's a likely starter. And then the good news is Steele Venters will be granted another year. He's playing again, coming back healthy. So they'll actually get Venters. So now you're having a Gonzaga team that's fresh off another Sweet 16 with basically every piece back aside from Anton Watson, adding one of Pepperdine's best players and getting a healthy Steele Venters. Gonzaga is absolutely going to be a top 10 team here. And there's a very good chance they compete for a top 3 seed when it comes to March. So gotta love Gonzaga there. They have a lot of good things going. All right, number 7, the Tennessee Volunteers. They're gonna lose Dalton Knecht. I think there was an outside, minuscule chance that he can exercise a COVID year. Would be very unlikely. Would be sick for all of us if he did. But that's going to clearly hurt. Rick Barnes has proven, though, that he can get elite transfers. He has no problem bringing those guys in from the portal. with what they were able to do with Dalton Connect, that will automatically attract those types of players from the portal that can score and will be given a focal, point in the rotation to where they can do so. So yes, losing him hurts, but they're going to be able to replace him on paper. You'll probably never truly replace a player like that right away, but they can get some guys who can score. What I think happens is we see Zakai Zeigler take that next step in his maturation as not only a basketball player, but as a scorer as well. Like, I want to hear about Zeigler shooting hundreds and hundreds and thousands of threes over the summer each and every day. I don't ever want to see a 1-for-8 performance from long range from him in a tournament game ever again. And without Dalton Connect, he's going to have to definitely take on more of that scoring role. He comes back. Jonas Aidu likely comes back. He needs to bulk up. Jordan Gainey, who they brought in, was more of a secondary option. I think you could see him take on more of a primary scoring option. They have enticing prospects like JP Estrella and Cameron Carr. Both of those guys will probably get given more opportunities. And then Jemai Meshack is back as well. They do lose, obviously, like I said, Connect. Toba Waka has hit the portal, so he'll be calling a new area code home. And then obviously Santiago Vescovi and our man Triple J. So there's a big chunk of pieces that they will be replacing. But I rarely doubt a Rick Barnes team during the regular season. It's when we get into March where I really get rattled and worried about them. During the regular season, I expect them to be a Terminator-esque squad. And even looking at it, if they add very, mediocre-like players, still a Aidu, Gainey, Zeigler trio there with Meshack, like, that's a top 10, top 12-ish team. And I'm just kind of basing this ranking on those guys, but I also expect them to land high-quality talent in the portal once again as well. All right, number 8, we have Alabama Crimson Tide. I would have had Bama higher in these rankings, but there's a little bit of uncertainty here, and I've seen them go as high as 2 in some media companies' rankings. They just have a ton of player decisions up in the air. Aaron Estrada's out of eligibility, so that's one that we know will not be back. The decisions at hand will be for Mark Sears, Grant Nelson, Nick Pringle, and Latrell Wrightsell. All have the option to return if they want it. I think it's a probable good chance that Wrightsell and Pringle return. Nelson might be 50-50, and if I had to sit here and tell you one way or another, I do think Mark Sears comes back, but a lot will depend on what kind of grade he gets. It's a weaker draft. Can he sneak into the first round? I don't know. We'll see. They do have the number 4 recruiting class coming in. So regardless of what happens with those guys, there are a huge amount of reinforcements coming here. 5-star Darian Reed is the crown jewel of that class. He is going to be an instant factor. And then they also went to Pepperdine. Pepperdine had several, it's wild. My man Lorenzo Romar, he got let go, but he always recruited well at Washington. He always recruited well at Pepperdine. You see there are 3 different Pepperdine players who hit the portal. 2 of them have already found homes in a P5, or I guess Gonzaga's not a P5, but upper echelon teams, and one is still looking for a new team, but just shows you how crazy that is. Anyways, Houston Mallett, a player that averaged 15 points per game, shot over 40% from long range. He has also decided to transfer into Alabama, so that's the built-in, insurance there if Sears doesn't come back. If Sears does come back, Mallett kind of slides into the Estrada role, and you have 2 legitimate scorers who love to shoot threes that can get even more fun this season under this Nate Oates system. Mallett, honestly, if you go back and look at any of his games with Pepperdine or any, clips, highlights, whatever, you'll see he's tailor-made and built for this system. Rylan Griffin, Jaron Stevenson, and Sam Walters will all be back. We know that, those guys have really barely scratched the surface on what they're capable of. Griffin, we saw a lot more of. Stevenson had some really nice games to build off of in the tournament. Walters, a very raw prospect, but all 3 of those guys are going to play more, have bigger roles for this team. And it just really adds another layer of intrigue for me to a team that, coming off a Final Four run, I don't think they're a one-and-done type of team. Like, I don't think they'll fizzle out. I think we'll see Alabama back into the second weekend, back into the Elite Eight, and possibly knocking on the door of a second straight Final Four. A lot will depend on Mark Sears' decision. Grant Nelson, of course, as well, but I'm really going to be watching that Mark Sears choice there. A backcourt of Mallett, Griffin, and Mark Sears could be very, very dirty. All right, ninth on my rankings here is the Baylor Bears. And this goes with the expectation that Scott Drew stays. That's all I have to go off of right now. Yes, it sounds like he's being offered the Kentucky job. There's a lot of conflicting reports out there. There's a lot of people who say he's not good enough to be in Kentucky, which makes no sense to me. Baylor fans say there's no way he'll leave. That picture going around today of him eating lunch in Waco supposedly was an old picture. I don't know. Not going to get into all of that. Right now, I have Baylor ninth, and that is with the idea that Scott Drew is coaching Baylor when the new season starts. This ranking for them will drop. If Drew does take the Kentucky job, it will cause Baylor to free fall in my rankings, and I assume others. And it's also going to put their freshman class into jeopardy, because what happens when coaches take new jobs, those freshmen tend to ask out of their NLI, their national letter of intent, and they go to a different school. Sometimes they follow the coach, sometimes they don't. So that's going to impact this a lot. Now, Ray J. Dennis is gone. No more eligibility. Yves Missy declared for the draft today. And Jacoby Walter, we already know he's going to be entering the draft as well. First round pick. Jalen Bridges is the wild card here. He does have a year of eligibility left. He can come back if he wants to. So we'll see what happens there. They definitely need him to. And then they have Langston Love, Jaden Nunn, and Josh Ajuona, who are going to be those main returners. So they have a nice little group there of returner players that, played big minutes, can score, and can, Nunn and Love. Love was hurt a lot. Nunn was more of a third, fourth, fifth option. He would be asked to step into a much bigger role this season, which I think he can handle. We also saw Caleb Lohner hit the portal, which, he was very good, I'd say, at BYU, never really got going at Baylor. They had him playing out of position. Not going to hurt them too much. They do have a top 10 recruiting class that is a led by the McDonald's All-American VJ Edgecombe. So you want to get to know him. He's going to be a big-time option for DFS in the fall. But again, we'll see what happens there. If Scott Drew takes a Kentucky job, I would imagine Edgecombe dips. What happens with those other players on the team is just a lot in flux. But if we go into the new season with Drew in place at Baylor, they are a top 10 team for me. All right. This is where it starts to get fun, because there's a lot of interpretations of how you can go from here. I think it's really kind of like those first couple of spots, the first 5 or 6, like it's kind of obvious who's in that group. Once you start getting into the 10, 11, 12 range, there's a lot of different outlooks. And how I see it is like this. At 10, I have Purdue Boilermakers, fresh off a national title game loss and a very strong tournament. Coach Painter, say what you will about him. He doesn't make adjustments. He does whatever, right, Zach Edey. You might think like, okay, Zach Edey's gone. This team's going to go into free fall. And that doesn't necessarily mean that one bit. They will be losing their lockdown defender, Lance Jones, just out of eligibility. And Mason Gillis has decided to take his last year of eligibility and go to a different school, which I think is actually not that surprising. When you look at what Purdue has, it doesn't seem like there's a spot really left here for Gillis. He could be in the same role again if he wanted to be, but he really sacrificed that this year because it was to get a title. It didn't work, but they got close. Looking at this team coming in here, he doesn't need to sacrifice again for that title run. He should go and get playing time and try to earn some money. So I don't mind Mason Gillis doing that. And you would think without Edey, man, this Purdue team, what are they going to have? But Braden Smith will be another year older. He showed major strides this year. Remember how panicked and frozen he was in the tournament game loss the year before, and Fairleigh Dickinson and how bad he was compared to the tournament run he went on this year and how good he was. Now the Vols exposed him a bit in their second half game, and then teams continue to do so, NC State and UConn. So he got rattled. But another summer of working out, bulking up, working on his shot. Braden Smith is, they can really build around him. They've got Fletcher Lawyer, like the Lawyer and Smith. That's a group of guys that they can build around. It'll transform their team a little bit going away from Edey. Now, Painter always has loved the big men. So Trey Kaufman-Renn, I think he's obviously going to be on breakout watch. he's going to absorb a lot of that usage from Zach Edey. Now, he won't be the player that Zach Edey is. He won't have a 40-50% usage rate or whatever crazy number you can think of, but he could be a 30% usage guy. He could be a 15-8 type of guy. He could even be maybe a 20-12 type of guy, because that's what Painter is comfortable with. And playing that way through a big man for Painter can be successful. It's when they get into tournament where things start to get dicey. But with that being said, Trey Kaufman-Renn is a really nice piece to take the reins from Zach Edey. They're going to have to rely on those guards more, and those other secondary options are going to have to step up. Camden Heide had that highlight reel putback dunk. He's been a solid three-point shooter throughout the season. He's going to obviously play more minutes and a bigger role. Miles Colvin as well. Both of those guys are on breakout watch, along with TKR for me. Two of those three have to make major strides for this Purdue team to continue to be competitive. But I do think they have the chops, and the overall composition of their roster definitely makes them still a top 10-ish type of team, even without Zach Edey. I think they'll be more determined than ever, and they still are going to be in the portal shopping away there too. There's just a lot of players available, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them add maybe another big man to the mix. All right, at number 11, I have the North Carolina Tar Heels, and I saw on, I think it was ESPN. Let me double check here. They had Carolina. Oh no, it was CBS. They had Carolina like super high, like up to number 2, and that it was curious to me because I have them at 11, and I think that's even a little bit generous. They're all over the board on everybody's, way too early rankings. There's just a lot in the players' declarations that we don't know. We know Armando Bacot's out of eligibility. Cormac Ryan is out of eligibility. Seth Trimble hit the portal. That's probably a good decision for him, because I just don't know where his role in this team stands had he stayed. We need the confirmations from RJ Davis if he wants to give it one last go, and Harrison Ingram if he's going to return. Those two coming back makes North Carolina a top 6-ish team, maybe even higher than that. Without them, I think they fall even a little bit further. So I kind of place them here at 11 because they have a talented freshman class coming in, top 10. Ian Jackson and Drake Powell are both going to be heavily in the rotation immediately, and both are freshmen who are much more mature than their age would indicate. But of course, that's watching them in high school rankings. That can change at the collegiate level. And I would expect Hubert Davis and his staff to be very active in the transfer portal as well, adding a couple of other guys, right? And they've got Jalen Washington, Withers. There's guys around here that they can talk into staying, and overall, they're going to be okay. But getting RJ Davis and Harrison Ingram to come back is obviously an integral part of where the Tar Heels actually stand. All right, at number 12, I have the BYU Cougars. Mark Pope he's on the Kentucky list. He's down the list of guys there, so not a first option, but there is a chance in an environment or a world out there, I should say, in which Mark Pope gets the Kentucky job. And if that were to happen, BYU would, they'd fall on their face without him, because guys would leave and it would be tough. Pope doesn't get enough credit. This BYU team, they fizzled out of the tournament early, but they did have 23 wins the first season in a P5 situation. I mean, that was very impressive to me that they were able to compete that well. They are going to be returning the bulk of their scoring from last season. Spencer Johnson is the only one that has definitively said he will not be back. Jackson Robinson is still weighing his options, so we'll see if he returns. And then Fusani Traore, who has amazing rates, Dallin Hall, who's still only going to be a COVID sophomore, and Trevin Nell will be another year kind of, under their belts. Those three I expect to take major strides. And then they do have a former top 100 recruit coming in by the name of Colin Chandler. He did go on his mission. So he had, it was a couple of years ago when he had that ranking. He's been on the mission for 2 years. Now he's back. Very typical for BYU basketball players. He factors in right away, I would imagine. So again, this is a team where there's not a lot of sexiness to it, but they have returning veterans. They have guys who played huge minutes, upperclassmen. This is the kind of team that when they get into a win or go home situation, they're very disciplined. They might catch one of those teams that's running more freshmen or inexperienced players on an off night, and that can really make the difference in March. And I think BYU is going to be a team even in another year of the Big 12 here, I think you see them as a ranked team for most of the year. All right, number 13, the Arizona Wildcats. Now, I noticed I was pretty low compared to the rest of the industry when it came to Arizona, and that's because their name and their coach, it usually warrants that higher ranking, and they've got some players coming in and they've got some players returning. But for me, it came down to Omar Ballo hitting the portal. Kashad Johnson's gone. Kylan Boswell hit the portal. Now, that may end up being addition by subtraction with Kylan Boswell. Losing Ballo hurts, but he's not got any more development. Ballo's one of those guys where he is who he is. He's a shot blocker. He's an inside scorer. He's not probably going to ever develop a 3-point shot. There's not a lot of high upside there for him. And they have the Krives, big that's here for year 2. And he's going to be a guy who I think erupts and really takes off. So I think the decision there for Lloyd and his program became like, who can we let walk off? And I don't think it was a situation where they told Ballo to leave. I think it was just like, we're going to have to play this kid, during their meetings. And Ballo probably decided there was a better situation for him out there where he could compete with a team that will be in the tournament or will have a championship time and needs a big man. He would have been great on Memphis had Memphis not got Dane Danger. So we'll see what happens. Ballo will have no shortage of suitors. He just didn't fit in with this Arizona team anymore. Caleb Love technically has an additional year left, believe it or not. So Love could come back. We could see Love on our screens once more. It's not a foregone conclusion that he's out. And their upside with him it's still better than without. The main thing is we're going to get more minutes, more usage, more opportunities for Jaden Bradley, KJ Lewis, and Motias Krives. Those 3 guys are going to be paramount to the success of Arizona, and they are the reason why I have them at 13. Without those guys, I would have them out of the top 25, even if Caleb Love were to come back. Those guys are all going to have huge roles. There's not going to be any shortage of talent on this Arizona team. They have a top 20 recruit by the name of Carter Bryant coming in. I suspect he'll be a borderline starter right away, possibly will be starting from day one. And as the team transitions into the Big 12 they're going to need all hands on deck. And I suspect that they'll be in the portal with Boswell, walking away and going somewhere else. Sounds like he may go to Illinois, by the way, for you Illinois fans. He is from Champaign. Bradley being the point guard here, but they'll probably need to go out and grab another point guard. Pele Larson's still around too, although it does sound like there's a decent chance he decides to just go professional and play overseas. We'll see. All right, at number 14, we have Marquette. Tyler Kolek is going to the NBA. Oso Ighodaro is going to the NBA. Why would I have Marquette ranked at number 14 while they're losing those 2 options? Well, it comes back down to continuity and chemistry, upperclassmen, veterans. That is what I am looking at when making a rankings like this. Cam Jones could potentially follow suit and go to the NBA as well, but I think the NIL opportunities for him are going to be massive. And we could see a this is lazy to say, I know, but a Marcus Howard-like season out of Cam Jones where he has a usage rate well above 35%. He takes 15 to 20 shots a night, and they frequently put the ball in his hands and say, go get us a bucket. That's an ideal situation, not only for him to make money at the college level, rack up stats, but also enhance his draft stock. Yes, we're in a situation where the draft is weaker, but I don't see Cam Jones really being a first-round player right now. He could work his way into that opportunity with a huge season. He has legitimate superstar potential, and he has a returning roster that would be built already around him, knows how he plays, and they all play their role very well. Stevie Mitchell, defender, can facilitate. David Joplin can shoot a little bit. Ben Gold taking the Oso Ighodaro role. I really like that for him. Chase Ross, we know he can score a little bit and defend. And then a healthy Sean Jones. You also have Trey Norman milling around back there too. So they have a really nice group of players. Again, this is another team that'll have to go to the portal to fill out some spots. But as long as Cam Jones comes back, this Marquette team is still a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. And he would be really a fun player and somebody who I could see having a Jermaine Cuisinart or Terry Shannon like run in the tournament where he just scores 1,000,000 points. So we'll see what happens there with his status, but they'll go as far as he takes them. At number 15, I have St. Mary's Gales. Now, I'd have them a lot higher, honestly. Like the Gales would be a borderline top 10 team for me if they hadn't lost Joshua Jefferson to the portal. That one hurts. And Alex Dukas is gone as well. No more eligibility. But there's still going to be plenty of chemistry. They lost another reserve player to the portal too, Howell. But Randy Bennett, you can't ever doubt him or deny him, because even coming into it, if his roster doesn't have a lot of name value, he's going to develop that name value. We've seen time and time again with Bennett, he just has a knack for developing that talent out of nowhere and making it work and gel together in a way that they just win a lot of games. So I have a lot of trust with him, and it also helps that they're going to be returning the WCC Player of the Year in Augustus Marshallonis. Mitchell Saxon will be back for another season, and Aiden Mahaney. Now, a lot of us, myself included, or mostly me, thought Aiden Mahaney would be a WCC Player of the Year type of candidate there, not Augustus Marshallonis. It didn't work out that way. Mahaney started fast, then he kind of fell off, and then he got strong again. But that trio will have St. Mary's playing really well, and they're going to be a tournament team there on that fact alone. But they will also be a team that'll have to hit the portal. I can just say that about every team, though. All right, at 16, this is where it really gets even more fun. Texas A&M Aggies. Buzz and the Aggies will be losing Tyrese Radford. We love Tyrese Radford. He was awesome. What he did against Houston, phenomenal. What he did at low rostership for so many times for us, we'll always have a special place in our heart for Boots. But the rest of the team should be back. And this is a team that, again, can hang their hat on the fact that they pushed Houston to overtime in the second round and scored a ton of points, 90 plus against Houston. That's huge. Wade Taylor would be a preseason SEC Player of the Year candidate if he returns, and would lead a group that includes my man, Manny Obasake, who is going to be taking the Radford role. Watch out, Manny O. He should have been playing years ago. I don't know why it took so long. I'm happy, though. He's going to be an absolute stud. Anderson Garcia, there were rumors that he was hitting the portal. He came on his own Twitter and said, I'm not portaling. In fact, I'm using my last year of eligibility for Texas A&M. I'm in it to win it. Love it. And Solomon Washington, who is still a pretty young player, all things considering, should be back as well. So this Aggies team has a lot going for it, and I think they're going to be one of those teams that kind of gets overlooked by the masses. Suddenly turn around and see, oh my God, they've won 25 times. This is a top 3 seed. Watch out. They're capable of a lot. And bringing back Wade Taylor and all that tournament experience they have will be massive. All right, at 17, I have the Clemson Tigers. Brad Brownell really silenced his critics with an Elite Eight appearance. Like every year when when media guys are talking about hot seats and this guy's, got to win or he's going to be fired. It's like every year it's Brad Brownell, but Brad he keeps his job. He finds a way, and he really found a way by taking that Clemson team on an unlikely run. And they ran through a gauntlet, right? New Mexico, who was everybody's popular upset pick, they just absolutely dropped a stone cold stunner on New Mexico. They beat a Baylor team that I thought had Final Four upside, and then Arizona. This Clemson team is very good. And the Alabama game, again, in another timeline, they win that game. There are going to be some decisions. PJ Hall, Chase Hunter, and Alex Hemingway all have an additional COVID year at their disposal if they want it. Going to be huge. Hunter just started to really unlock his full upside. It took him some time. Like we saw it last year at times, but the addition of Joey Girard really kind of hurt him a bit. He figured out how to play with Joey, and it worked out, but it took a lot longer than we thought. Him coming back would be absolutely crucial. Jack Clark has decided to go into the portal again, so he won't be back around. But Ian Schiffelin, another year of Schiff, who is just he's so good, so very good. RJ Godfrey, Chauncey Wiggins, and Dylan Hunter. So, a group of Schiffelin, Godfrey, Wiggins, and Dylan Hunter, that is, could be considered a top 25 team. When you throw Hemingway, Chase Hunter, his brother, and PJ Hall into the mix, then you have a team that's clearly top 20, possibly even top 15. and maybe even a little bit better. Now, Jake Heidbreder, who transferred from Air Force last season, redshirted, he will be available as well. And I didn't see that he re-hit the portal or anything like that. So he's, going to be in the mix, probably taking the Joey Girard role. I think this Clemson team is going to be, overlooked again, even though they just made this run. And it's going to be a situation where, hey, they could make another deep tournament run here, especially if PJ Hall's back. Remember, PJ Hall didn't even play his best games during the tournament whatsoever. All right, at number 18, I have the Maryland Terrapins, the Terps. I was really high on the Terps coming into the season. With the group that they had, I thought they're going to make a big step forward. Unfortunately, they underperformed drastically. Jameer Young and Julian Reese were fantastic. Deshaun Harris-Smith went through freshman, woes. He hit a wall. Dante Scott was pretty mediocre early. He got better, and they had no bench whatsoever. Only 16 games won. That's fully on Kevin Willard to underperform with that roster that he had. But they've done a really good job already in the first few weeks of the offseason for them. I know it's only been really a week, but for them, it's been a few weeks. They've reshaped everything. Jameer Young is gone. Dante Scott is gone. They've also lost 4 reserves to the transfer portal, namely our guy, Jamie Kaiser. But they've went into the portal. They got Virginia Tech, Rodney Rice, who can score. He's been hurt. He was hurt a bunch, but when he was playing, the guy could go out and get a bucket at any time. And then the Belmont transfer, Jacoby Gillespie, who, can put up 20. He averaged over 16 points per game at Belmont. Big-time scorers, and they look like ideal fits for this Terp system. Now, the real key, they got Julian Reese back too, by the way, who's going to be playing more 4 than 5. The real key to this is going to be the 5-star center, Derek Queen. I came away from the McDonald's All-American game thoroughly impressed with Queen. I try not to get too excited about a glorified All-Star game because, there's guys who could crush it. Justin Edwards last year going into the Kentucky, he went nuts in the McDonald's All-American game. Wagner went nuts, and you saw it didn't really translate. It's an all-star game. But it's hard not to look at what Derek Queen did in that game and not get really, really excited. 23 points, 8 rebounds, and he had 5 assists to go along with 3 steals. All over the place, and he was completely unstoppable. If he had the ball on the block, they couldn't stop him. That'll be different going against collegiate athletes on the block that muscular and tough and have that experience. But the nice thing for him is he'll be in a front court with Julian Reese, and there won't be a lot of opportunities for them to double on Queen because they can get punished because now they have actual legitimate scorers besides just Jameer Young. Another year of Deshaun Harris-Smith, who hopefully he's another player that shoots thousands of threes each and every day. Jordan Geronimo will be back. They have a really nice 6-7 man rotation on paper right now. There's some more pieces, some more scholarships available. But this Terps team, I don't think they underperform with this group. If they do, let's put it this way, Willard, he needs to be fired. I know he probably wouldn't be, but this is a tournament team. And if they win under 20 games again with this roster, Willard just isn't that guy. And so this is a big one. You can't waste this 1 year of Derek Queen, clearly going to be a one and done. You get back Juju Reese, you've got to make this work. You've got to have this happen. And I hope for the sake of Willard that the Terps are a tournament team. But I'm going to be backing them a lot. All right, at 19, we have the Creighton Blue Jays. I struggled with this one. I'm not really a huge Creighton Blue Jays fan. Even at Baylor Shire. I feel like with him, they were a really good team, but they were a little bit overrated at times, even though they made the run 2 years ago and they were stout, throughout the season. Now they're going to be without Baylor Shireman, who's, after 2 great years out of eligibility. Fran Farabello is out. They still won't have much of a bench. They're going to have to go portal shopping, but this all stems, on 3 players for McDermott: Ryan Kalkbrenner, Stephen Ashworth, and Trey Alexander. As long as those 3 come back, Creighton has to be considered a top 25 team. There is a lot of agony potentially happening here for this Creighton program. If one of those guys doesn't come back, if two doesn't come back, if all three didn't come back, Creighton is going to be going through a rebuild. So whatever they have to do NIL wise to get those guys to return, that they're a top 20 team with them. Now they do have a top 20 recruiting class, but I find it hard to believe that they would be able to rely heavily on any of those guys. They are secondary players at best, shoring up their bench. But they're going to have to go in the portal. And they have been linked to several high-profile transfers. So we'll see as we go here week by week and what kind of moves they make and if they go up or down. But as it stands right now, I have them at 19th with a lot contingent upon the big three of Kalkbrenner, Alexander, and Ashworth. All right, at number 20, we've got the Miami Hurricanes, another team that was ravaged by injuries. The talent was there, guys. Larinaga is a great coach. Say what you will. Their starting five, healthy, as good as anyone's in America. But that starting five rarely played together. They were always hurt. There's a lot up in the air. We know Norchad Omier has declared for the NBA draft, and I think the writing was on the wall that he wouldn't be back. The moment that the transfer portal opened back up again, they went out. They got Lynn Kidd from Virginia Tech to play the 5. They got Brandon Johnson from ECU, can play 4 and 5. I think it's pretty obvious at that point that Omier is not going to come back. So those are two great portal additions. They did lose Bensley Joseph to Providence. That was announced earlier this morning. So, they do lose 2 of their 5 starters. But Nigel Pack, Wooga Poplar, and Matthew Cleveland, it sounds like all 3 of them would be leaning to come back. And they also have a 5-star coming in by the name of Jaleel Bethia, who looks like an absolute star in the making. And it's tough because, all of these 5 stars, when they come in, God, they look so good, but, there's an adjustment period there, and we'll see. The nice thing for Bethia is he wouldn't have to be the alpha. There are guys around him who can help him transition to that. And then as the season goes on, you'll see him really start to take over. So this Miami team, once again, absolutely loaded with talent. Couldn't possibly see them, shrivel up to injuries again. It would be a really tough situation if they had all these injuries once again. But we'll see. Sean George, all the upside in the world. He's declared for the NBA draft, so probably will stay in, being that he has major upside, and I think he'll end up working his way into a higher draft pick than what we probably think. But even still, this Miami team has a ridiculous amount of talent, and they'll still go out and get more in the portal. I only think that, as long as they stay healthy and they get Pack, Poplar, and Cleveland to return, they're a possible Final Four candidate team. And they would move up in my rankings once that confirmation happens. But yeah, health. Make sure you keep these guys healthy. All right, number 21, the Auburn Tigers. Bruce Pearl. We like Bruce Pearl here at the show. I like Bruce Pearl. I think he's a swell guy. But man, his rotation last year for DFS purposes was awful because he played way too many guys, 18 to 20 minutes. And that's come back to bite him because a massive amount of players have hit the portal on him, namely Aiden Holloway, Trey Donaldson, and Katie Johnson. Yes, Katie Johnson still has a year of eligibility. I look at rosters, I follow news, I watch, I'm really, really into this stuff. And even I was like, Katie Johnson has another year? The COVID year, it's so, once it falls off, we'll have a handle on who's actually got eligibility here. But yeah, all 3 of those guys gone. And Trey Donaldson showed major flashes. Aiden Holloway. I think we'll see Holloway go to a school where he can play 30-plus minutes a game, and he just breaks out, and everybody will be like, why didn't Bruce Pearl play him? That's going to happen with Aiden Holloway. Even so, losing those guys, Janai Broom, who's mulling his decisions, Chad Baker, and Denver Jones, that's a nice trio to build around heading into the season. Jalen Williams is out of eligibility, so he's gone as well. But as long as those 3 return, and I know Denver Jones, at FIU, was a big-time scoring machine. bit of an adjustment here. Towards the end of the season, we started to see more of the Denver Jones that I think most of us expected to see from day one. So those guys are important pieces. They are adding a 5-star in the name of Tahad Pettiford. He's technically a point guard, and a lot of people consider him to be the best point guard in this class. But Bruce Pearl has stated in many interviews that he doesn't see him as a point guard. He's a scoring combo guard, so he's going to use him in a variety of ways. I just hope he doesn't play him for only 20 minutes a game. Like, if he does that, he's going to develop a really bad reputation, and you're going to see that guys just won't go there. I do think that with the right portal additions, this Auburn team can be really nasty. I do like what I see with, the system that Pearl runs. It is very advantageous and it does lead to winning basketball. But we can't have these Leonard Hamilton-like rotations, Coach Pearl. Like, you gotta drop that off and start playing the 7, 8, maybe 9 guy rotation. Play your guys, man. Think of all the times where Broom played like 24 minutes. It's like, why? And now Broom's, considering possibly leaving. So we'll see what happens. But the Tahad Pettiford kid is going to be the real deal. And he will certainly carry them with or without those others. But a lot of work still to be done for Auburn. Number 22, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Rutgers is going to make a triumphant return to the tournament this year. I'm going to be on record saying that right now, and our guy Mike Kutry will probably love hearing that. They vastly underperformed. The roster was okay, but it didn't. Those pieces didn't fit, and sometimes that happens. And the nice thing is, Coach Pikehill, he's kind of hit the reset button here, but it's not going to be like a rebuild where they're going to be bad and then they're going to work their way to being good. It's a type of reset where we've reloaded talent. We're going to win games right here, right now, and we're going to go to the tournament. Jeremiah Williams, Jermichael Davis, and Emmanuel Ogbali are the only 3 players from last year's roster that will return. Jeremiah Williams being probably like the lone starter. Michael Davis is a nice kind of like 6th or 7th man. The nice thing is they've already hit the portal. They got out and got Zach Martini, who's just kind of like a rebounding, physical type of player. He was at Princeton this past year. That's going to give them that level of Cliff Omarui like toughness without Omo. Martini will be, playing a lot in the interior. They also go out and get Tyson Acuff from Eastern Michigan, who is going to be a really nice fit. I do see a problem potentially where there might be not enough basketball for these guys. They bring Acuff in. He did average almost 22 points per game at EMU. It's the 8th highest in the country. They do have 2 freshmen future lottery picks coming into this team as well. So I'm the only thing that worries me is we get in a situation where there's no chemistry and obviously, trying to fit these pieces together. I hope it works because the talent is there. It's undeniably there. 6th best recruiting class coming in for Coach Pikehill and Rutgers. Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper are the 2 names you want to know. As it stands right now, they both look like they're on track, barring a horrible season or an injury, to both be in the top 10 in the 2025 NBA draft. They are both really good, and aside from Derek Queen, performance-wise, they both stood out in the McDonald's game as being NBA ready type talent. Lots of excitement around the program. They clearly have a lot of work to be done. They're still, they got a couple of other lower recruits in that class too that will play, but they've got to go to the portal and they've got to add a couple of more, big men. That's really what they need. Williams, who is a big scorer, he's going to have to take a step back and maybe be more of a facilitator. Acuff, same thing. Like, there's no lack of scoring on this Rutgers team. I just don't know how it's all going to fit together yet, but they're definitely a top 25 team talent-wise right now. But it's also April 10th. We have a long ways to go yet, so won't get too excited, but Rutgers definitely looks like they're going to be a fun team. All right, at number 23, Ohio State Buckeyes. What can I say? The Buckeyes are a fun team. Under Jake Diebler, they finished at 8-3. after taking over for Chris Holtmann. Holtmann's doing his thing over in DePaul, by the way. We'll talk about that on another show. Really almost put them into the tournament, like an improbable run, and looked like they could make that run through the Big Ten tournament. They didn't, but they had a lot of momentum heading into this offseason here. Bruce Thornton, Felix Okpara, and Devin Royal. Those are the three key pieces that are already coming back. They are losing a lot to the portal. Okpara and Devin Royal both, they started to the last month of the season or so, especially under Diebler, really took their games to another level. I'm expecting big things from them. Thornton is a hoss. We know that. They did bring back Michi Johnson, who spent the last couple of seasons at South Carolina when Michi was a member of the Buckeyes. Prior to that, he was a very raw prospect. Coming into it, a backcourt featuring Michi and Bruce Thornton is going to be ridiculous. Michi is better off the ball anyways. Thornton can be more of a facilitator. Thornton was good as the primary option, which he'll still be, but he'll have another guy next to him that can score. And Thornton able to break down defenses. Michi's going to get a lot of uncontested spot-up shots that he wasn't getting at South Carolina. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that dynamic works. Roddy Gale's hit the portal. Scotty Middleton's hit at the portal. Zed Key. But Roddy Gale was very good next to Thornton, but I think Michi Johnson is borderline elite here in this system. Michi Johnson's little brother, who is a 2026 five-star prospect, has agreed to come to Ohio State too. Not reclassing or anything, but thought that was interesting that Michi comes home and his brother also is going to play for them as it stands right now. But yeah, that backcourt of Thornton and Michi, that's going to be nightmarish for opposing Big Ten coaches. So good luck with that, guys. All right, number 24, the UCLA Bruins. Are they back? They just might be. Last year, I was very confused. The Bruins were in a lot of early top 25 preseason stuff, and it just made no sense. Like, yeah, the Pac-12 in its final season, it was weak on paper, but the Bruins roster was just really, as my son would say, mid, right? They struck out on almost all their priority transfer portal targets. They went and got a bunch of international guys who are super raw. It was going to take them a long time to learn the style of, collegiate play. It just didn't work. They went 16-17 and it just didn't work. I like what Cronin's done so far, though. He wasn't going to sit on his hands for a second straight offseason. They got Lazar Stefanovic last year, too. That was like their top portal get. And he's good as like a fourth, fifth option, but as a second option, that's just tough. But they have gone out and they've struck immediately. They got Sky Clark from Louisville, who has, had some ups and downs throughout his young career. But I like the fact that he's going to be playing for a disciplined program and coach like Mick Cronin. He could start right away, or he could come off and be like an elite sixth man. Kobe Johnson from USC. He played third fiddle there behind Isaiah Collier and Boogie Ellis, but elite defender, racks up steals. He started to be able to score a little bit there at the end. He is a total prototypical Mick Cronin type of guard. So immediately getting those two from the portal, the Bruins are on a much better path than they were last year. Dylan Andrews, Sebastian Mack, and Lazar Stefanovic are all back as well. So now Lazar, he gets to move back to more of a role player type of spot, which is better for him. Dylan Andrews, another season where I think he could take off, especially playing next to Kobe and Clark. And then Sebastian Mack, who showed flashes offensively. I think we could see that next step from him too. So the Bruins already have a group of 5-6 perimeter wings that really intrigue. Now the front court could be the problem. Adim Bana is still entertaining the possibility of entering the NBA draft. So without Bana, that's a big hit. Berkey and they're deciding what they're going to do with him, and Ademara, could come or go. So they're going to need to still get into the portal and get some front court options, regardless of what Bana ultimately decides to do. But when it comes to wing depth and perimeter options, the Bruins are loaded. And if they go out and they get I don't think they're after him, but if they got like a Cliff Omarui type of center, they would immediately jump up to the 15-16 range. That would be a really complete looking roster. And I think they would be back in the tournament for sure. So I have the Bruins up at 24 right now. 25th and the final team in our way too early top 25 rankings. Appreciate you guys hanging out with me, by the way. There are quite a few of you there. It definitely hypes me up, so I appreciate that. Number 25, the Cincinnati Bearcats. Yes, the Bearcats. Under Wes Miller, this is the year they make the NCAA tournament. Mark my words. They'll be returning a quartet of intriguing guys. Day Thomas, who flashed and had some slate-breaking performances. We'll bring this back to DFS a little bit. Dan Skillings, who we know is just a jack of all trades. We love him. And Seamus Lukosius, who in the NIT showed out in the late, part of the season. He had some 40s. I mean, he just came out of nowhere. Went from a fifth option to an alpha at times. We love this Bearcats team from a DFS perspective. And then, of course, Jizzle James, who started to push his way into more minutes there as the season went on. No doubt in my mind, he's a starter, could be one of the best point guards in the country with the level of talent that he has. Cincinnati will need to go out and find some. They're just like UCLA. They'll need to find some front court options. Aziz Bandiago could return. We'll see. Jamil Reynolds has already decided to go off to South Florida, so he's gone. Victor Locken has hit the portal. So they have a big hole there in the front court that they'll need to replace. But just like UCLA, they have a litany of perimeter and wing options that make them a really compelling squad. And if they hit a home run in the front court in the portal, you're talking about a team that could be a possible, dark horse, Sweet 16, Elite 8 type of squad. So I really like these last couple of teams, UCLA and Cincinnati, as it stands right now with the way that their rosters are shaping up. They also went out and got Tyler McKinney and Tyler Betsy. They're a couple of freshmen in the class. That'll shore up their depth. Again, they just need to address the front court there, and we'll see how that ends up. So that is the inaugural CBB Super Show way too early top 25 rankings. As you guys watch this, those of you who are watching it on demand, I would encourage you to comment there on the on-demand YouTube channel or on Twitter or in the Discord and kind of tell me, what did you agree with? What was I way off about? What kind of teams do you think belonged in there that I didn't talk about? There are like I said, a lot of different interpretations of this. Ultimately, at the end of the day, truly rankings, especially during the season, they don't mean a whole lot. But I did want to do this and go over some teams that I'm looking at and give you an opportunity to really, internalize what some of these rosters are going to look like here. And it is just kind of a fun thing as we transition towards the coverage of, sports media-esque type things here for the next couple of months before we hit into college football previews, which will take place again in about mid-June, early July. So yeah, that's the first one. There is one team that I really wanted to rank but didn't because I can't rank that as this has got to be as it stands right now. But Coach Schertz from Indiana State took the St. Louis job, right? And pretty much everybody on Indiana State has hit the portal. Robbie Avila hit the portal, and you can mark it to where it says do not contact. So players can have that option. Like usually what that means is they have somewhere in mind that they're going to go. Ryan Conwell, Isaiah Swope, Julian Larry, and Jason Kent all have hit the portal as well. It sounds like there's a really good opportunity that all of them, sans Ryan Conwell, go to St. Louis to play for Coach Schertz. Ryan Conwell is an Indiana kid. The Hoosiers are apparently all over him. We'll see what happens there. There's a bunch of programs that have reached out. I suspect Ryan Conwell will end up being a Hoosier, but Robbie Avila, Isaiah Swope, Julian Larry, and Jason Kent, there's a really good chance they all go to St. Louis. And if that's the case, the Billikens are going to be a threat to make the tournament. And you already know they're going to be hell on wheels to try to prove to the committee, we're in a better conference now, different team. We won in the tournament. Let's go. And I think that they are going to be a very compelling team to watch there. And we'll see if any of the St. Louis guys end up staying there for Schertz as well as they remake that roster. But that was the team I wanted to rank but couldn't because as it stands right now, they don't have a good enough roster to be ranked. All right, that will wrap up the show. Thanks again for everybody who tuned in to hang out with me as we went over this over the last hour. Next Wednesday, we'll be back right around 9 p.m. PST as we break down some portal talk. There will, as I mentioned, this offseason be some interviews that take place. Those will be recorded stuff with coaches and players. But we'll just do our thing each and every Wednesday. And if you guys have ideas or things you want to talk about, feel free to please drop those on Twitter or in DMs or right here on YouTube as well. I always say this show is just as much yours as it is mine. And I want to do things that is what you guys want to watch and what you enjoy doing. Nice thing is also FTN now has a playback.tv partnership. That's something that I really wanted to have at times last season. Basically, you can jump on, stream a game, hang out with your community, have people on, and just talk about the game, talk about stuff, and literally just watch the games together. So now that we have that, that's going to be something we utilize a lot during college football season and during college basketball season. Lots of cool things in the works. A new site is in motion here, going to be completed. And I have lots of plans here for refining our projections, not only for college basketball, but introducing them for college football as well. And hopefully getting an optimizer for both so we can be a true one-stop shop for everything. Thanks a lot, guys, for your continued support. And I will see you next week on the CBB Super Show. Take care.